Hi, ladies and gentlemen. This is me going live on YouTube. Hope you enjoyed my show. I'll try and be a little bit before time, but I feel a little bit under the weather. Thank you.
England found it was the history books that were part of the problem.
History books being used after the war were the same as the history books before the war. The Australian Education Departments didn't tear up the old books and throw them away. They kept using them.
As the decades pass, the notoriety of the 19th of February slowly grows. But for the daughter of a veteran of the bombing, she didn't find out about what her father had gone through until 70 years later.
My first understanding of what happened in Darwin was in 2012, when I visited for the 70th commemoration of the bombing.
It was her own lack of awareness that inspired her to start researching and eventually penning a memoir based on her father's experience.
My thoughts kept moving in the same place. They kept landing in the same place. Why don't I know about this? Why don't the people of Australia know about this?
She blames censorship as part of the reason.
Letters coming out of Darwin were censored. They were slashed with razor blades so that people's loved ones were receiving letters that were just pieces of cut up paper.
77 years on, the study of Australia at war is a mandatory subject for school students across the country. Darwin remains an option, with most curriculum authorities suggesting it as a significant event of study, but not mandating it. With so few Australians directly impacted, Dr. Lewis says you can understand why Darwin is overlooked.
It was an enormous war. 50 to 60 million people died. So you've got to fit in an enormous conflict into a small space in terms of the curriculum.
But in Darwin, where stark evidence remains, it's a tragedy that will always hit home. Mitchell Abram, ABC News, Darwin.
Time to check the weather now. Here's Nate Byrne.
Most of the country is looking fairly cloud-free at the moment. A bit of storm activity across the north and in New South Wales, but just offshore, tropical cyclone Omar spinning well off the coast at this stage, and it's not expected to make a coastal crossing. It's likely to turn back towards the southeast long before it does, but it's pushing some very hazardous surf conditions into the east coast. The Capricornia coast in Queensland, warnings are already current for today and tomorrow. You may see some of those swells reaching northern New South Wales as well. We're expecting waves up to 5 metres on Wednesday, coinciding with a king tides. We'll keep an eye on that. Meanwhile, in the north of the country, lots of heat with severe and extreme heatwave conditions and severe fire danger today for the Ashburton Inland in Western Australia. Very high fire danger on both sides of the country. Meanwhile, in terms of rainfall, it's a fairly dry day. A little bit of storm activity through parts of the north, just extending down into Western Australia along a trough there later. Bit of wet weather for eastern New South Wales and for the west of Tasmania as well. Looking ahead to tomorrow, the rainfall picture doesn't really change very much. It looks very similar to today. We'll be keeping our eye on tropical cyclone Omar, of course, as a really big swells start. For the capitals tomorrow, it's a mostly sunny day for Brisbane, getting to 33. A shower or two still for Sydney, 25 there. 29 with clear skies in Canberra, 22 for Melbourne. Hobart, you've got a possible shower developing, 21 will be the top for you. 24 and fine in Adelaide, a sunny 33 on the way for Perth. And Darwin, a partly cloudy day, 34 degrees.
That's ABC News for now. I'm Ros Childs. Thanks for joining us.
Know the story, anytime, anywhere with ABC News Online. For all the latest information you can trust, head to news.abc.net.au.
There are at least two sides to any story, and everyone has an opinion.
Weeknights.
Debate without the spin. Just say no isn't working.
We don't govern by temper tantrum.
Passion, expertise, unscripted chat.
The Drum, tonight on ABC News.
Claire Hoover here, host of The Pineapple Project, the podcast that teaches you all the stuff you never learned in school. This season, we're finding our dream careers, building a network and beating burnout at work. So make life sweeter and less prickly with The Pineapple Project, available on the ABC Listen app.
makes ABC unique is there's a sort of approachability about it. There is a real conversation between the audience and the broadcaster. We can influence everything, and we do see ourselves back at us, which is really important. And that's what I love about it.
Many people call MDR-TB a contagious cancer.
A unique journey into a different North Korea.
Volunteers have been joining doctors to fight an often fatal disease.
Everything about this project is unbelievable.
Foreign Correspondent, tonight at 8 on ABC.
Get the latest news whenever you want, wherever you are, with the ABC News app. Top stories from around the world. Choose your news with personalised topics you care about. And get the latest breaking news with live notifications. Download the ABC News app, Australia's most trusted news source.
Today, the Finance Minister on the defensive after not being charged for flights by a company awarded a government contract.
I know that the question is going to be asked, didn't you keep an eye on your credit card? I should have. It's the truthful answer.
Major infrastructure and military networks on alert from the rising threat of cyber attacks. The founder of controversial Chinese tech company Huawei rejects international criticism that its technology can be used for spying. And weather warnings in place as tropical cyclone Omar threatens southeast Queensland. Hello and welcome to ABC News. I'm Roz Childs. The Finance Minister Matthias Cormann has defended himself after not being charged for flights by a company awarded a government travel contract. Senator Cormann followed up on the payment when he was contacted by the media yesterday. Political reporter Henry Bello has more from Canberra.
The Finance Minister says he didn't notice that he hadn't been charged almost $3,000 for a family holiday and flights for himself, his wife and his 2 kids to Singapore. Now, he booked those flights through the travel company Hello World, but he wasn't aware that he hadn't been charged until he was contacted by the media, the Sydney Morning Herald and The Age yesterday, and then he set about trying to change that and update his records. Now, what Senator Cormann is saying is that the administrative not necessarily his, but it was from the company that he had given them his credit card details and that they hadn't processed this transfer. Now, what's got Labor quite excited about this is that company is run by the Liberal Treasurer. And so they're having some questions there about were the proper processes followed? Was this a free flight in return for favours for that company, which had been negotiating some government contracts at the time? Now, as we speak, Labor senators are going through this in estimates at the moment. We can hear from Labor's Jenny McAllister, who outlined what she expected from Senator Cormann before estimates. Let's have a listen.
Senator Cormann is one of the most senior members of this Senate. He is the leader of the government in the Senate, and today he will come before the Finance and Public Administration Committee. Senator Cormann understands the protocols of the Senate in relation to questions such as these. Questions around conflict of interest in relation to tender processes are extremely serious, and the fact set reported in the media today raises very serious questions that Minister Cormann needs to answer.
So, Henry, what has Senator Cormann had to say in response?
Well, he said that there is no direct link between these flights and the fact that a subsidiary of this company had given some government contracts about the same time. He says that that admin mistake was from the company involved. And he's also there is evidence that he was given these free flights in exchange for anything. And to make that point, he's released a statement from the company which says, yes, it was their administrative fault. These flights were not free and they were never intended to be free. That's what he's told Senate estimates in just the last half an hour. Pointing out he should have been paying more attention to his credit card statements, but that no processes and procedures have been broken here. Let's have a listen.
I personally supplied my credit card details. I personally gave the instruction for the flight booking to be charged to my credit card. I thought that that had happened. I know that the question is going to be asked, didn't you keep my credit card? I should have. This is a truthful answer. But what I would offer by way of explanation, if not by way of an excuse, is that with the extensive travel I do undertake on a weekly basis. There's a lot of travel-related expenditure that goes through my credit card.
So questioning will continue this afternoon. It remains to be seen whether the leader satisfies that explanation.
Thanks, Henry. The threat of cyber attacks against Australia's infrastructure and military networks is on the rise, according to a senior defence leader. Major General Marcus Thompson leads the Information Warfare Division, which is in charge of protecting the Defence Force from hackers. In his first major media interview.
Mary.
I apologise for the intrusion. I had intended never to do this again, but circumstances have changed, especially mine. I'm dead, you see.
Whoa. Freaky.
I'm not around to help you anymore, but there are people who can. They've helped me to stay hidden all this time, and they can do the same for you. So if you and your friends should ever need to disappear, call this number. Goodbye, my daughter. I'm sorry I let you down.
It wasn't me. I swear I don't know anything about Project Eternity.
Then why were you sending messages to Mary Douglas? So you admit it. Miss Darlings, does that sound like conspiracy to you?
Conspiracy, fraud, and theft.
It wasn't like that.
You could be looking at a long prison sentence for this.
No, no, please. I can't go to prison. I've got kids. You've got to let me go.
Let her go. I was working with Mary Douglas. Bill knew nothing about it.
Get out. How do I know you're telling the truth?
Calvin has taken over the Institute. We can't let her have Project Eternity. I can't get there in time, which just leaves you. You have to go to my private lab and destroy it.
And did you?
I followed Mary's orders.
So, are we going to talk seriously about Mary's offer?
What, the offer to walk out and leave our whole lives behind us? That offer. Put it there.
Who is it?
Hello? I hope you don't mind. The back door was open.
He just walked straight in.
Sorry, but I really need to talk to Eve. About what? I would like to apologise for my little outburst in detention the other day.
No, don't trust him. Excuse me. He knows about Eve. He really does. I know, but he doesn't have to know that we know that he knows.
What?
Look, just leave this one for grown-ups, okay?
I saw you take off your hand. I saw numbers and letters scroll across your eyes.
But those things are just delusions brought on by the stress, Alyssa.
That's what I thought. But then the truth hit me.
Did it hurt?
Very good. No, the truth set me free. Because these weren't delusions at all. They were visions.
What?
I realized what it was I'd been repressing all these years.
What was that?
My imagination. You see, even as a boy, I never read stories. I only ever read maths books. I dreamed of solving famous problems like the Kaufman conjecture or the Chang hypothesis. But it turns out my real talent lies in creative writing. Eve, you've changed my life. That's why I'm dedicating my book to you.
What? What book?
Eve, the robot next door.
You wrote a book about a robot called Eve?
Well, at first I thought of some joke names like Android or Cyborg. But in the end, Eve just seemed more truthful.
Do you think this book will ever get published?
Well, thanks to the internet, anything can be published these days. All you need is a laptop, and I'm spending all my life savings on publicity. I'm thinking advertising billboards, big displays in bookshops. Everyone in this city will know all about Eve. Anyway, I better get going. I have a meeting with the cover designer. It was very nice to see you again, Eve.
Android, cyborg, that's fun. Well,
Where's the lab, Nick?
Why do you want to know?
Because there might just be enough traces of Project Eternity there to save you from prison. You may as well tell us. We'll find it soon enough anyway.
The thing is, it's a long way away. 6 hours drive, more like 7, and it's quite difficult to find.
Just give me the address. Then you can go.
Really?
I don't need you anymore. Once we've found that lab, we'll know a lot more about Project Eternity. If this book is a work of fiction, how can it prove that I'm a robot? It won't. But Catherine's not stupid. If Bevan plasters the billboards all over town, she'll soon work out what you are.
We have to just...
You got that right, Una. When there's food around, Mossy is always there too.
We better go and look for him, Baba. Mossy!
The message, no matter where you flee, China's so... Now you can make out...
Josh, thanks.
Thank you.
The Aged Care Royal Commission is today hearing evidence from key ageing industry representatives, including Dementia Australia. Reporter Candice Prosser is following proceedings in Adelaide.
the CEO of Dementia Australia, Marie McCabe, has been giving evidence this morning, and she used the opportunity to call for dementia-specific guidelines to ensure a high quality of care for the ever-increasingly complex needs of people in aged care facilities. We heard that there are currently nearly 500,000 living with dementia, but many more go undiagnosed in aged care facilities, and that's expected to double by mid-century. So she asked that be mandatory, that there be dementia-specific training for all aged care workers. She also said that the diagnosis of dementia can be a profoundly isolating experience for people, and there is a lot of discrimination against people with dementia in terms of how they're approached, and people completely leaving them out of decision-making regardless of the level of their condition. Let's have a little listen to what she told the Commission this morning.
This is the chronic condition of the 21st century, and it's also a social issue, and one that we need to get very interested in, because we will know somebody, it will be a loved one. 1 in 3 of us in this room will develop dementia at some point, and we need to know how to best support people living with it.
Candice, who else is due to give evidence today?
It's a big day for industry representatives. We're also hearing from the CEO of Aged and Community Services, the Aged Care Director of Catholic Health Australia, and also the CEO of LASA, Leading Aged Services Australia, Sean Rooney, is due to give evidence this afternoon.
Candice, thanks. Accomplished portrait artist Melissa Beowulf and her 2 eldest sons, Torsten and Bjorn, have gone on trial in the ACT Supreme Court today, charged with murder over the death of Mrs. Beowulf's mother-in-law in 2015. 81-year-old Catherine Panin was found dead at the base of some stairs in the family's Canberra home, with her case at first treated as a tragic accident. Elizabeth Byrne has been following the story. She joins us now. Elizabeth, what prompted police then to consider that there was more to this case? Well, basically, it was discovered that Melissa Beowulf would have been the full beneficiary of Mrs. Pannon's will, except that she was making plans to change that will on the same day that she was found dead. So police looked into this a bit more closely, and have come up with a circumstantial case which has drawn in both Mrs. Beowulf and her two eldest children.
Why have prosecutors then charged those three people with murder?
Basically, because they allege we haven't heard any sort of direct accusation about Mrs. Pannon being thrown downstairs or anything like that, but the prosecution has alluded to conversations that were recorded or collected in some way between the three about, and they've suggested about disclosing some evidence, that sort of thing. So the three of them have been charged as a sort of a joint commission. This comes across the backdrop of quite an unusual family. They were very unconventional. Anna Beowulf, who was Mrs. Pannon's son, her only son, actually had two relationships and children in both those relationships, Mrs. Beowulf being one, and there was another lady who also lived in the house with her son. And the family were all together in the same house for quite a long time. So there are a lot of complicated relationships tied up in this case.
And how long is the case expected to run, Elizabeth?
Well, it's been set down for 8 weeks, and there will be something like 91 witnesses that have been listed so far. So it's likely to go on for a long time. A lot of the evidence will actually be detailed financial statements, but there'll also be from witnesses.
Thanks, Elizabeth. The founder of Huawei has hit back at the United States after officials announced they were pursuing criminal charges against the Chinese company. The global electronics maker is facing claims that its technology could be used to spy on customers. In an interview, Ren Zhengfei has rejected those concerns and described December's arrest of his daughter, Meng Wanzhou, in Canada as politically motivated.
This is the man the US says is helping China spy on the world. Ren Zhengfei, a former engineer in the Chinese military, started Huawei 30 years ago with just 3 people. He's built it into a global telecoms giant. But concerns over Huawei are rising. There are worries that Huawei's technology could be used to spy on its customers and competitors, bypassing security mechanisms.
We will never undertake any spying activities, and we will never accept anyone's instructions to install a backdoor. If we take any such actions, then I'll shut the company down.
What would you do if the UK decided to ban Huawei altogether? Would you pull your investment out of the UK? Would you cut jobs over there?
We will continue to invest in the UK. We still trust in the UK. If the US doesn't trust us, then we will shift our investment from the US to the UK on an even bigger scale.
But the US insists Huawei could use its technology to spy, and it slapped multiple charges on the firm for stealing trade secrets, committing fraud, and breaking American sanctions on Iran. On its request, Meng Wanzhou, Mr. Ren's daughter, and Huawei's CFO, was arrested in Canada, setting off a new round of tensions between the US and China. Up until now, Mr. Ren has chosen to stay clear of the politics.
I object to what the US has done. This kind of politically motivated act is not acceptable.
But questions about just how independent Huawei is from the Chinese Communist Party are being raised. Countries like Australia have banned Huawei's 5G technology just on those doubts.
In the last several years, the more coercive, and this really crystallizes worries that companies like Huawei will be forced to help them conduct espionage.
Chinese companies have only started to threaten the dominance of Western businesses on the global stage in the last decade. As they've cut, the world has had to grapple with the different party. Whether they do or not may be besides the point, but the perception itself could determine their success in the future.
We're going to Canberra now, where Labor Senator Murray Watt is speaking.
The estimates to answer some basic questions that Australians want answered. Yesterday, we had evidence from the AFP that the reason that in their view a crime had been committed in this information being leaked from Minister Cash's office. They recommended prosecution to the DPP, and the only reason that didn't occur was because there are about 8 people, including Minister Cash and Minister Keenan, who refused to provide witness statements. Now, no other Australian has the luxury of turning down the police when they ask for a witness statement, but we've got 2 senior cabinet ministers who thumb their nose at the justice system, who thumb their nose at the police, and refuse to cooperate by giving a witness statement. Now, today, that evidence has been backed up by the DPP. What we've learned from the DPP today is that it was their opinion on the evidence that the AFP forwarded to them that there was a prima facie case, that a crime had been committed, that it was in the public interest for a prosecution to occur, but the only reason it didn't happen was because they didn't have enough evidence, particularly because ministers and staffers had refused to give evidence and refused to provide witness statements. So we've got the DPP here, we had the AFP yesterday. The only person who's missing from this equation who has any answers is Michaelia Cash. Now, the time for Michaelia Cash to remain in hiding is over. Enough of the whiteboards, enough of claiming privilege, enough of claiming immunities. It's time that she actually did her job, came to estimates after the lunch break, and answered some questions that only she can answer. She has a lot of questions to answer, and it's not fair for her to put it on to public servants to do her dirty work and have to answer questions for her. Are there any questions for Brendan or me?
I ask a question to both of you. Are you both comfortable with people getting many bags from PNG
Sure. Look, I think it's clear that the government was to continue to play politics with medical requirements for people that are detained and in our care. We wanted to codify the practice to ensure that medical advice was considered. One of the reasons why this current government has been transferring people from Nauru, including up to 900 detainees, has been for medical reasons, as we know. And if the requirements are on the mainland, which I understand they are, then clearly it would be consistent with both practice of the government and the decision made by the Parliament to ensure that that transfer take place, provided that all security matters are considered, and indeed serious criminal offences, serious criminal matters may be considered before any transfer take place. I'm not aware as to whether, in fact, Christmas Island is prepared for such support, such medical support, and frankly, therefore, I guess it's a hypothetical, Joe, to ask that question. But really, all that Labor has done is ensure that we codify a practice that exists now, that's been utilised by the current government, as I say, including the transfer of 900 transferees from detention centres on Nauru and PNG. Well, I say it goes really to the question of medical requirements, and I would think that that decision has to be made by the Minister, having listened to the advice of the medical experts. But I understand one of the reasons we transfer people to the mainland and why the current government transfers people to the mainland of Australia is that's where the medical expertise is.
I agree. Going to hear from that, and I better get back to estimates. Yeah, thanks, Randy. Thanks.
Oh, good. Thanks, everyone.
We're watching now Labor Senator Murray Watt speaking about the absence of Senator Michaelia Cash from continuing a Senate estimates hearing today. That was into a media tip-off about police raids on union officers. And the Shadow Minister for Employment, Labor's Brendan O'Connor, also there. He spoke briefly about the Medivac bill that was passed last week. Authorities are warning Queenslanders to expect dangerous surf conditions and abnormally high tides over the next 2 days as tropical cyclone Omar tracks towards the coast. Reporter Caitlin Gribben is at Miami Beach on the Gold Coast.
You don't need to just take my word for it. You can see how windy it's getting here now on the southern end of the Gold Coast. And these are the sort of conditions that the Weather Bureau has been warning people about, that the wind from tropical cyclone Omar is only going to get worse in the coming days. Now, what's really interesting, Ros, about this system is a couple of weeks ago we were talking, of course, about the floods in north and northwest Queensland. What happened with that low that brought that devastating rain? It went out to sea over Vanuatu, and then it actually reformed into a tropical low and is now strengthened to become tropical cyclone Omar. So more than a fortnight since that heavy rain started in Townsville, the system has now come back towards the Queensland coast to create this cyclone that's bringing this huge swell to much of Queensland's coast. There's a hazardous surf warning in place from the Capricornia coast, which is in central Queensland, all the way down to the coast. And there's even warnings that there could be some dangerous surf conditions in New South Wales in the coming days in the northern part of that state.
So what is the forecast then, Caitlin? How bad is it going to get?
What we're hearing from the Bureau, Ros, is that these winds could cause some pretty dangerous surf conditions. Waves of up to 5 metres are expected. Now, you might be able to see that some surfers are out taking advantage of some of these big waves. We're not near the 5 metre level just yet, Ros. We're hearing that tomorrow and the next day will probably be the worst. So swimmers, particularly rock fishermen, boaties who are in small tinnies, are being urged to stay out of the water in those coming days. There's going to be the highest high tide that we've seen so far this year, so abnormally high tides, as well as some inundation expected. I was down at a surf club at Currumbin earlier today, and the car park there was already starting to experience some inundation. It's sort of right on the beach, so more of that expected as well in parts of Brisbane, actually, in those areas near the ocean that might be affected by some inundation. So warnings very much about that. Some swimmers this morning also telling me that they couldn't even stay on their feet when they were right on the shore. That's how rough these conditions are, Ros. So that's only going to get worse in these coming days into the weekend and maybe even Monday.
Yet more extreme conditions for Queensland. Caitlin, thank you. Now, for sports news, here's Shannon Burns, starting with an Olympic runner who's beginning an appeal against a regulation restricting testosterone levels in female runners.
This is a very big week coming up for the South African long-distance runner, the 800-metre Olympic champion, Caster Semenya. She, as you mentioned, is currently starting a trial which will go for a week. She's begun her appeal against the regulation restricting testosterone levels in female runners. Under the rule, female athletes with naturally high testosterone levels would have to race against men or change events unless they took medication to reduce it. The governing body for World Athletics, says the IFFA, says that the rule will protect the sanctity of fair and open competition, but the 28-year-old is hoping to overturn the regulation at the Court of Arbitration for Sport, claiming the rule is unfair. It will be a week's hearing, and that really will define the rest of the South African's career. It is the first day, and the case will be heard until Friday. And I guess, Ros, on this, we still won't know until around March the 29th when the verdict is expected to be handed down. So the Olympic champion, her career really on the line with what comes out of this, but we'll have to wait a couple of weeks till the verdict.
She's had a horrendous time in the lead up to this, hasn't
she? Yeah, absolutely, exactly. So this is a very defining week for her career, but I think for, setting the tone as to whether this rule will stay in place or not, and for female runners in the future if it occurs.
Now, it was awards night for the WNBL last night.
Well, it continued the celebrations for the Canberra Capital, who's won WNBL championship after Game 3 thriller against Adelaide Lightning. And no surprise, really, that the Canberra Capitals co-captain, Kelsey Griffin, she won the WNBL's most valuable player, which next season will be called the Susie Batkovic Award after she retired after 16 years at it. She had dominated that award, Susie, for the last 3 seasons as well. So it's the first time for a number of years that we've actually seen a Canberra Capitals player take that award. She was also
also the MVP for the final series as well, so really led from the front. She was the big winner last night. She claimed 119 points out of a possible 189, 20 points clear of the next rival, and she had an absolutely outstanding season. And more importantly, their celebrations continue today. I understand there's a parade through the University of Canberra with the trophy, so they're still celebrating the WNBL title win. And big news too in the NBL, Andrew Gaze has mutually decided to step away from the Sydney Kings at the end of this season. He will take them to the NBL playoffs. This is the first time that the Sydney Kings are in the playoffs in the last 6 years. His contract was to finish at the end of this season, and he has said that he won't pursue looking at a renegotiation at all. He wants to return back to Melbourne with his family there. And, well, who knows, there's another NBL team there that comes into the competition next year. They may be looking for a new head coach, but Andrew Gaze finished with a 50% record. He won 42 games and he lost 42 games. But the news today, he will take them to the playoffs, but he won't be coaching from the end of this season whenever they finish up. Their next game is next Thursday against Melbourne United with their playoffs starting.
Finally, soccer then, Manchester United are through to the FA Cup quarterfinals.
Yeah, they certainly are. They had a fifth round win this morning against Chelsea. They all really wrapped it up in the first half as well. It was 2 first half goals, and both goals coming from headers as well. Ander Herrera in the 31st minute, and then it was Paul Pogba close to half time. Chelsea, of course, were last year's FA Cup winners, so they are now out and they lost at home.
Maybe some more later on, folks. Thank you.